Unser letzter Gast ist heute Ilan Pappe. Mein Name ist Klaus Waliszewski. Ich bin Mitglied im israelischen Komitee gegen Hauszerstörungen und bin auch im KOPI-Sprecherrat. Ich möchte jetzt aber, bevor wir anfangen, kurz Ingrid Rumpf das Wort erteilen und sie nochmal auf die Nachbarausstellung aufmerksam machen kann.
Vielen Dank, dass ich da kurz dazwischen was sagen kann. Meine Stimme ist nicht ganz so sonor leider wie deine. Die versagt mir gerade so etwas, aber ich würde gerne nochmal angesichts des Jahres 2018, was uns ja dann demnächst bevorstehen wird, aber auch schon November 2017 natürlich mit der Teilungsresolution, doch nochmal einen Vorstoß machen in Bezug auf die Nakba-Ausstellung, also die Nakba-Flucht und Vertreibung der Palästinenser unseres Vereins. Ich finde das natürlich nach wie vor extrem wichtig, dass diese Ausstellung weiter wandert. Sie war ja schon in über 150 Orten, nicht nur in Deutschland, sondern auch in der Schweiz, in Frankreich. Ich glaube, die meisten von Ihnen haben wohl auch schon davon gehört, deshalb muss ich das vielleicht auch gar nicht erzählen. Aber falls es noch 1 oder 2 oder vielleicht auch 10 gibt hier unter euch, die das noch nicht gehört haben oder die auch bereit sind, in ihrem Ort nochmal, weil seit 10 Jahren wandern sie jetzt ja durch die Republik, da kann man das gerne nochmal aufleben lassen, zumal es auch inzwischen viel kontroverser ist und auch viel mehr Zulauf erhält als noch vor 10 Jahren. Also ich kann nur sagen, es lohnt sich. Den Katalog nach wie vor bei uns hinten beim Abimels auch an dem Tisch, kann man den nochmal erwerben. Und ich habe auch so einen Zettel mit Ausleihbedingungen dabei, den können Sie auch mitnehmen. Also ich will das nur wärmstens empfehlen. Im Moment dümpelt es nämlich etwas und es könnte eigentlich und sollte wieder besser werden. Das war schon. Dankeschön.
Man muss Ilan Pappe, glaube ich, gar nicht vorstellen. Geht wahrscheinlich keinen im Saal hier nicht an, der sein Buch Die ethnische Säuberung Palästinas nicht kennt oder das zumindest von gehört hat. Sein neues Buch liegt ja übrigens auch aus. Was ist los mit Israel? Das können Sie hier erwerben am Tisch. Ganz kurz nur, Sie wissen, dass er zu den neuen Historikern gehört, der irgendwann aus Israel vertrieben wurde wegen seiner kritischen Haltung und seit vielen Jahren in Exeter an der Uni ist. Ich habe noch ein Zitat gefunden, das ich interessant fand, und zwar von einem renommierten Journalisten. Der hat gesagt, Ilan Pappe ist der mutigste, unbestechlichste und am schärfsten urteilende Historiker Israels. Hier ist
Thank you, Klaus. It's a great pleasure to be here. I apologize for not being with you before. My aeroplane was 3 hours late. The Zionist movement tried to prevent my presence, but it shows you they're not as strong as they used to be. So they can make you late, but they cannot cancel your trips anymore. That's very encouraging. I would like to talk about the future through the history and to be loyal to the title that I was asked to address, which is what should the EU and the United States do by looking or revisiting the history of 1967 in a way that I think would at least explain my opinion of what we should do next, or what should we expect that can happen next. Some of you are probably aware that in recent years there is a new interest among young scholars in Israel and Palestine. It's very encouraging. There are more than 150 PhD students around the world today who write a PhD, a doctorate, a dissertation, thesis on Palestine. Many of them are from Palestinian background, but quite a lot of them are interested in Palestine as activists and want to know more through academic studies. And one of the interesting common background for the new academic interest in Palestine is the fact that they are excited by a paradigm, an approach that was, is not new, but when it was first introduced in the 1950s, did not catch the attention of academics or activists. And this particular paradigm that really is behind most of the more exciting works today in the academic world in Palestine, this paradigm is settler colonialism. It's an idea that wants to separate the classical colonialist projects from the settler colonial projects. Settler colonialism is the movement of Europeans out of Europe, not as people who were sent by an empire to colonize, but as people who escaped, like the Jews, from Europe because they were under existential danger. And they were looking for a safe place to settle. And quite often, as happened in Palestine, they chose a place where someone else already lived. And the late scholar of settler colonialism, Patrick Wolf, says that in this historical moment, when fugitives, people who run away from danger, meet someone else in their homeland, they work according to what he called the logic of annihilation. The logic of removing the native. You cannot create, in the mind of the settler, you cannot create a safe place as long as the native indigenous population is there. We know that in North America, this ended in the genocide of the Native Americans. It ended in the genocide of native people in South America, in Australia, in New Zealand. In some cases, especially when settler colonialism became a later historical phenomenon, then the settlers did not resort to genocide, but to other means in which to limit the influence, the impact, the importance of the natives. South Africa is a very clear point, where you impose apartheid in order that the native presence would not undermine the project of settler colonialism. And a lot of the young scholars suddenly see Zionism as a classical case study, as a textbook case study of settler colonialism. And they have to deal with one particular challenge, which says, yes, but in all the other cases, there was no attachment, previous attachment to the land. And of course, even liberal Zionists still think that the story of people who allegedly come back home after 2,000 years is something that can historically or morally work as justification for the logic of annihilation of a settler colonial project. It can explain why Jews wanted not only to find a safe place in the world, but wanted to go back, as they saw it, to a place that they thought was also part of their heritage or past. Settler colonialism is not interested in the narrative. It's not interested in the story that people tell themselves why they leave Germany and go to Palestine. It is not even interested in the fact that they had to leave Germany and look for another place because they were under danger. What settler colonialism is interested in is what did they do to the native population. And Zionism from 1882 until today is a story of criminality against the native. This is where we have an issue with Zionism as a settler colonialist movement. Not to invalidate the fact that some scholars say, oh, actually the Jews who were in Europe are not the descendants of the Jews who lived in the Roman Empire. You're all familiar with Shlomo Zand's theory. Or that the Jewish people were a religion and could not be regarded as a national movement. This is all really not very relevant. It's not the validity of the story that is morally debated. It is what you do in the name of the story that we challenge, and that's why we are here today. And it's important to understand that from an historical perspective, Zionism, as a settler colonialist movement, looked at the native Palestinians very much like any other settler colonial movement looked at natives. And removing the natives, kicking them out, transferring them, making them disappear, as Herzl wrote in his diary, was part of the logic of the settler colonialist project of Zionism. There was no moral problem with that. There was no hesitation in implementing it when the right historical moment allowed the Zionist movement to do it. And I think this is the perspective which is used for understanding what happened in 1967. Because usually, when you hear mainstream academia, mainstream media, discussing 1967, you get the impression that the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians began in 1967. You get the impression that peace is about the fate of the Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. You get the impression that if you want to reconcile, you want to achieve reconciliation, you have to agree on the future of what is called the occupied territories. This is the essence of the conflict in the eyes of the mainstream media, academia, politics. This is the perspective that led the so-called peace process in the last 50 years. If only because it is a total failure, it's good enough for us to ask maybe this perspective is wrong. There are many other reasons to say that this perspective is wrong. But the very failure of a perspective that the most powerful states in the world supported, that so many intellectuals and liberals supported, the fact that it did not achieve anything in the last 50 years. As human beings, we should say, wait a minute. Probably we are not going in the right direction. If in the last 50 years, not only we don't have peace, we have more oppression, more colonization, more violation of human rights and civil rights. And in fact, looking at the last 50 years, the worst time for the Palestinians was immediately after supposedly successes in the peace process. Every person in the West Bank will tell you that 1992 was much better than 1995. The years after Oslo are far worse for the life of the Palestinians than the years before the peace process, which reminds us of 1947. The years of the life of the Palestinians before the United Nations peace plan were far better than the life of the Palestinians after the peace proposal. Whenever there is a great success of peace proposals or a peace process, the Palestinians immediately pay a high price of that success. So the whole premises is must be based on the wrong assumptions. The settler colonialist project, of course, came to a very successful moment in history in 1948. I won't go into the details of 48, you're quite familiar with that, but it's very important to understand that the moment Britain announced in February 1947 that it intends to leave Palestine and transfer the Palestine issue to the United Nations, the leadership of the Zionist movement, the political leadership, the ideological leadership, the military leadership, understood that there is an historical opportunity, an historical window to take the logic of the annihilation of the native, if you want, and to try and implement it as fully as possible. And it's not surprising that exactly a year after Britain announced that it decided to leave Palestine, exactly a year after, the Zionist movement experimented with the transfer, the forced expulsion, transfer of 3 Palestinian villages in February 1948, when Britain was still responsible for law and order in Palestine. And they waited to see the reaction of the international community, of the British, and the Arab world. And because the expulsion of these 3 villages passed without any reaction, 2 months later, in April 1948, the Zionist movement decided to go on a project of expulsion and destruction of a magnitude that we've only seen in the Middle East, recently in Syria and Iraq. We keep forgetting that. The Zionist movement totally destroyed the urban space of Palestine. 11 towns. In my hometown, Haifa, out of 75,000 Palestinians, few thousands were left. Almost the whole population of Jaffa was forced out of Jaffa. And towns like Baisan, Safad, Tiberias disappeared from the map as Palestinian town. And this was all done in 2 weeks, with the British responsible for law and order, with the international community having presence on the ground of journalists, diplomats, and the Zionist movement understood that this is legitimate in the eyes of the world. And when you destroy the urban center of a community, you destroy the head, the heart, its ability to defend itself. And this was all very calculated, very intended, and very systematic. Now, the next chapter, as you probably know, after the Arab world finally got up and under pressure of public opinion, was trying to stop the next stage in the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. On the 15th of May 1948, when military troops from the Arab world began to enter Palestine, we understand that the military effort, although it was significant, because a lot of Israelis lost their life fighting against these military troops, but it was not that significant to stop the next stage of the ethnic cleansing, which was directed now at the rural parts of Palestine, the countryside. Hundreds and hundreds of villages were destroyed and expelled. The Jewish state was created over nearly 80% of Palestine as a result of the successful plan of the settler colonialist project in 1948. They left out 2 areas. In those days, we didn't know that these areas would be called the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Nobody used those terms. We have to remember that. The West Bank was created by an agreement between Israel and Jordan. My colleague Avi Shlein wrote a very good book on this, called The Collusion Across the Jordan. A very good book that describes how the Israelis and the Jordanians decided that in return for the annexation of that part of Palestine that became the West Bank to Jordan, the Jordanian army, which was the only significant military force in the Arab world, would have a very limited role to play in the war of 1948. Jordan took the West Bank without one shot. And what you see, the map of the West Bank, it's a map where the Jordanian army stopped in a prior agreement with the Israelis, not because the Israelis stopped them with military might. The Gaza Strip also is a new idea. There was no Gaza Strip in 1948. The Israelis needed a space into which to push hundreds and thousands of Palestinians from the south of Palestine. So they created this huge refugee camp called the Gaza Strip and allowed the Egyptians to rule it, because what was important for the Israelis is to have a small minority of Palestinians as possible within the Jewish state. Ironically, because the settler colonialist project of Zionism wanted to create a democratic state, it was very important to make sure that for the first democratic elections in Israel in 1949, the Jews will arrive with a huge majority. Otherwise, you cannot have a Jewish democratic state. You can have a democratic state, but not a Jewish democratic state if the Jews are not the majority. I think it's very important to understand that this whole event. Did I ring from you as well? I'm a socialist. No, you're not. I'd like to share. Mine is mine, yours is mine. The international reaction to what happened in Palestine was indifference. Israel got a very important message. This inhuman expulsion of people, and it really doesn't matter how many were physically expelled and how many fled because they were afraid. The criminality of Israel was not to allow the people to return. Doesn't really matter what methods they use. What is important is that if I leave my house because you shoot over my head, I have all the right in the world to go back to my house. It doesn't really matter whether I left, whether you took me on the bus, whether you dragged me out of my house. My legal right is to go back. In fact, even the Americans thought it was the legal right of the Palestinians. And the United States, I don't know if you know that, imposed sanctions on Israel in 1949 for not allowing the Palestinian refugees to return. Unfortunately, the American policy since then, as you know, was reorientated, changed to a different direction. But the message from the world basically was Jewish democracy can be built on the dispossession of the Palestinians. And this is the background for 1967. Both the decision not to take 20% of Palestine, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip on the one hand, and the message from the world that creating a Jewish state while de-Arabizing Palestine is a legitimate idea in the eyes of the international community. That the Israelis don't have to worry about international review. I say this because we have to understand 67 in this context. A lot of the young generals who participated in the 1948 war from the Israeli side were very angry with the decision not to occupy, especially the West Bank. They regarded the West Bank as the heart of ancient Israel. And they used this metaphor, without the heart, the body cannot survive. And they created a lobby immediately after 1948. They created a lobby that pressured the Israeli government to find the pretext, to find the excuse to occupy at least the West Bank. They were made of two groups. One was very religious in a way, and believed that Israel needed the West Bank because it was the ancient homeland. The other were more strategically orientated. They believed that Israel needed the River Jordan as a natural barrier from a possible attack from the east. Tom Seger, in his book 1967, described quite in his beautiful language, I hope it also comes out in German when he writes, he describes very nicely how important this lobby was before 1967, how influential it was on Israel policy making. Ironically, the person who stood between this lobby and the Israeli possibility of occupying the West Bank already before 1967 was no other than David Ben-Gurion. David Ben-Gurion, who was masterminded the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, did not see the wisdom of occupying an area full of Palestinians after expelling so many Palestinians in 1948. So you expel 1 million and then you incorporate another 1.5 million. It doesn't make sense for him. Demographically, Jews had to be a majority, and he had no problem with every no moral problem. He justified every means to make sure that the Jews would be a majority, as we've seen already in 1948, even with massive expulsion of Palestinians. But he was against the occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And there were two moments in the history of Israel, in 1958 and in 1960, that the Israeli generals were pushing Ben-Gurion to occupy the West Bank, especially, not so much the Gaza Strip. In 1958, because they claimed that Jordan was about to become radicalized like Iraq, which was another Hashemite kingdom. And the Americans prevented Israel from occupying the West Bank in 1958. The Israeli army was already ready to do that. In 1960, it's even more interesting. In 1960, the same story that happened in 1967 happened in 1960. Israel and Syria began a war in the north. Jamal Abdel Nasser, the Egyptian leader, said, I have to protect my Syrian brothers by sending military forces into the Sinai Peninsula to threaten Israel that if they attack Syria, I will attack Israel. With one difference two differences between 1960 and 1967. One was Ben-Gurion, who understood that Nasser was talking the talk but not walking the walk. So he did not allow a preemptive Israeli military attack, as the Israeli generals would do in 1967. And secondly, the other difference was that the United Nations in 1960 had a different Secretary General, who was also not very impressed with Jamal Abdel Nasser, and decided not to take the United Nations out of the Sinai Peninsula. And therefore, there was a buffer zone. As you remember, in 1967, a different United Nations Secretary General immediately took the United Nations forces outside and created a dynamics that was very difficult to stop afterwards, that allowed the Israelis to exploit the situation in order to fulfill the dream of most of the Israeli politicians in general of creating the Greater Israel in June 1967. But for me, the most important thing was that Ben-Gurion was ousted from any significant political power in 1963. And in a new book that I've just published, which is called The Biggest Prison on Earth, I described something which is called the Shaham Plan. This was a plan that the Israeli army prepared in 1963, immediately after Ben-Gurion was out of politics. A plan to take the military rule that Israel imposed at that time on the Palestinian citizens inside Israel and transfer it to the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. They said, we already have a mechanism, an apparatus, for how to control a Palestinian group. We can use it to control another Palestinian group if necessary. It's not that in 1963 the Israeli army knew when the opportunity to impose military rule on the West Bank and the Gaza Strip would come. They didn't know. But what is interesting, how well prepared they were for ruling the life of millions of Palestinians. And this comes from the logic of settler colonialism. The logic of settler colonialism is that the homeland that you want, the whole of it has to be yours. And in it, you have to have as few of the natives as possible. This is the 20th century. Later on, it's the 23rd century. You are a pragmatic politician. You want to be part of the West. You want to be part of the civilized nations. So you use very sophisticated techniques and methods to do it. You can't do 48 again and again. But the vision is the same vision. And I want to go to the immediate aftermath of the June 67 war to prove my point. To the credit of the Israelis, and they still haven't learned their message because they still think most of the historians are not like me and Moshe Zuckerman, who are loyal people. And they open documents. Really, they do. They just declassify, and you can even access it through the internet, the minutes of the Israeli cabinet between the 9th of June 1967 to the end of June 1967. Very crucial period. The minutes are very interesting. They are the minutes of the most consensual Israeli government that ever existed. The 13th government of Israel. The 13th government of Israel was a unity government. And as a unity government, it represented every political shade in the Israeli political system. And this gave them gravitas. They felt like they really are representing the Jewish vision of future Israel. And this government, and this comes very clearly in the document, took 3 decisions which are important to understand, and I think are the best explanation why the next 50 years would be such a total failure in the efforts of people to bring peace on the basis of a two-state solution. The 3 decisions, which I think are still the cornerstone of all the Zionist political parties in Israel, whether they are on the left, whether they are on the right, they all agree on the 3 decisions that were taken in June 1967. The first decision was not to expel the Palestinians of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip in the same way that the Palestinians were expelled in 1940. You have to remember, half of the ministers in this Israeli government were generals who expelled Palestinians in 1948. So they seriously talk about the possibility of doing it again. They said, of course we need the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Can't we do what we did in 1948? And they eventually decide against it. They saw that the historical circumstances would not allow massive expulsions. Not that they did not expel a lot of people in 1966. They expelled the people from the Muslim quarter in the old city. They expelled 3 refugee camps near Jericho. They expelled half of the people of Jenin, although they expelled them into the West Bank, not out of the West Bank, but hundreds of thousands of refugees were finding their way to Amman and other places because of Israeli projects of expulsion. But it was not the ethnic cleansing of 1948. So that was the first decision. The second decision was very clear. Israel cannot exist without the West Bank. There were tactical discussions. Does it mean that we need to rule it directly? Does it mean that we just have to have soldiers on the River Jordan? Does it mean that we can have an agreement with Jordan that would allow us to rule the West Bank together? Some even said maybe we can convince the Palestinians to have an autonomy and give up the ideas of security and leave it in our hands. All kinds of options were discussed. The kind of withdrawal that supposedly the two-state solution is based on, the idea that Israel was willing to get out of every part of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and to allow a normal state to be created, was never accepted by any significant Israeli politicians from 1967 to this very day. There were tactical discussions of how best to do it. And when Yigal Allon was the Minister of Labor, said, to make sure that everybody would understand what we mean, do we have a national consensus to send Jewish settlers from the left-wing kibbutzi movement and settle them on the Jordan Valley? Just to make sure. That's the first project. Let's settle in the Jordan Valley. And everybody agreed. And then he said, we also agree that we have to settle near Jerusalem. This is consensus. Of course, we have to annex Jerusalem as well. And then came the idea of creating a city near Hebron, because Hebron is very important to the Jewish people. Of course, they did not like the map that would be produced a year later by Gush Emunim, the Messianic movement. The government didn't want to settle in densely populated Palestinian areas. But the Messianic movement had a biblical map, not a strategic map. And the archaeologists of Israel convinced them that the biblical map is at the heart of Palestinian towns, like Nablus, Halil, and elsewhere. And therefore the two maps sometimes clashed with each other. But eventually, if you put the two maps together, the consensus Zionist map of what can be colonized in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and the Messianic map, the differences are not there. But together they don't leave any space for any independent Palestinian existence. The third decision is the most important one, to my mind, is the one that the world has ignored and is the main explanation for the failure of the peace process. The Israelis had to decide, if we don't give up the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and we don't expel the people, what would be the status of the people? Shall we, as Menachem Begin suggested, give them citizenship? Equal citizenship right, he suggested. He said, if you say that they are staying, what is the difference, Menachem Begin asked, between them and the Palestinians in the areas we occupied in 1948? We gave them citizenship, of course limited citizenship, under military rule, which Menachem Begin was against. He was against military rule. He said, we can give them citizenship. They would be happy to be in a Jewish state. Of course, this was not the majority position. The majority position was they would be without citizenship. I mean, they can have Egyptian, Judaian citizenship if they want to, and have connection to Egypt, but they will not have a proper citizenship. And there is a chilling dialogue between Abba Eban, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Moshe Dayan, the Minister of Defense, about this issue. Abba Eban felt a bit unhappy about it. He said, we're going to keep millions of people without basic human rights and civil rights. That's what we are saying, actually. And he asked him, for how long can we keep millions of people under such conditions? And Moshe Dayan answers, well, at least for 50 years. And that's where we are today. But I think Dayan meant for 500 years, not for 50 years. And in that very moment, if you take the three decisions, you can understand that Israel actually created a mega prison. The only human construction that keeps millions of people without basic human rights and civil rights, and incarcerates them, just because they are Palestinians, even before they do anything. The only human outfit that I can think of that resembles such a total violation of human rights and civil rights is the prison, where in the Western society we agree to have a prison because we say we have to rob these people of their basic rights because they are criminals. In dictatorship, the prison is used as punishment against descendants, not just against criminals, against the people that the dictatorship doesn't like. In Israel, it is used as means of keeping the Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip without expelling them and without fully annexing the territories so that you don't have to give them civil rights. Yes, there was a version of an open prison, definitely. And I think that's when the Israelis were seriously thinking about the peace process. It's something that would somehow convince the international community that the kind of an open prison where Palestinians can move around, can even work in Israel, without undermining the basic settler colonialist project in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, could work because it's better than the other option, the ultra-maximum security prison, the kind of the model we've seen in Gaza today and we've seen in the West Bank after the second Intifada in 2002. But I really think it's important to understand the DNA and mentality of the Israeli political and military elite with regard to the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. They don't have the same genuine debate which the civil society in Israel had. There was a genuine debate in the Israeli civil society between what I can call the custodians, people who believed we keep the West Bank and the Gaza Strip in custody until there is peace, and then we give it back in return for peace, and what you can call the redeemers. People said, no, we have redeemed the ancient land of Israel, and therefore we are not giving it back. Later on, we called it the left and the right in Israel, or the peace camp and the national camp. But as an historian, if you go to the government documents, if you go to the military discussions, if you look at the strategic conversations, the debate is not there. Or if it is there, it is not an ideological debate of giving back the territories or keeping the territories. It is a tactical debate between those who said we can indirectly achieve the rule over the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and those who say no, we need to be there directly. And when there is a Palestinian uprising, everybody goes for the direct rule. When there is a sense that the Palestinians are totally disempowered, there are even some of them are willing to go along with the open prison model, and when the world seems to look at the open prison model and calls it a peace process, peace process, then there is more support for the indirect idea of rule. I will finish by saying the following. The term occupation is irrelevant to what goes on in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Occupation goes for 4 or 5 years, military occupation. And then international law is relevant. Because international law regards the violation of the occupied as temporary, not for a very long time, as something necessary because there was a war and someone was defeated and someone was successful. Israel did not occupy the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. It colonized the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And I know it's very difficult to talk about decolonization in the 21st century when colonialism in our mind is a 19th century phenomenon. But if we will not accept the settler colonialist nature of Israel today as a state, we will not understand that as long as we continue to talk about occupation, the end of occupation, a two-state solution, we are falling into the tactical debates that the Israelis have with themselves, which they are very happy to conduct with us in the world and to conduct with the Palestinians. Yes, help us to find a tactical, useful way of indirectly controlling the West Bank and the Gaza Strip so that we can have the territory without having the people. For instance, we don't have to expel the Palestinians. We make sure that they don't move out of their villages and towns. We don't have to settle everywhere in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. We can partition the West Bank into a Jewish West Bank and an Arab West Bank. And if we cannot do it in the Gaza Strip because it's so small and so dense, we'll do it from the outside. God knows it was such a successful exercise, the Gaza Strip, that the world nearly gave Ariel Sharon a Nobel Peace Prize for this redeployment of the Israeli colonization project. We need to change our dictionary with this idea. We really need to change the language. And I know it's a big ask. It's a big ask after 50 years of using words such as occupation, using ideas like two states that on the face of it seem to be reasonable and the only way of getting the military out of the life of the Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And this is why there is a legitimate support for the idea in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. But this is not going to work. This is not going to work. What we have to find, and I don't have the magic formula, but what we have to find is a way to talk to ourselves and to others of decolonizing not just the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, to decolonizing the whole project that is called Israel in a way that would create something that the people of South Africa were able to create for themselves, at least politically, if not economically, which is a country of equality, of egalitarianism, of equal opportunities, a country that can reconcile with the bad chapters in its past by building hope for the people in the future. And you cannot discuss the right of the Palestinian refugees to return. You cannot discuss the rights of the Palestinians in the Galilee and the Nakab to be protected from the hidden apartheid system of Israel. And you cannot discuss the rights of the people of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip not to live under the danger of being daily abused by the military which is now has privatized its oppression to private companies. You cannot do it if you accept the basic international position that this will all end if peace comes. No. This has to end first if you want to discuss peace. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Ilan Pappe. Wir haben jetzt noch eine fast Viertelstunde Zeit für Fragen. Und Sie wieder sich als Mikrofon zu stellen, dann wird der Reihe nach hier abgearbeitet. Gut, wir haben einen Frager.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. I have one question. How does Yitzhak Rabin fit into your interpretation?
Thank you for your question. There is a tendency, which is very normal, that if someone met such horrific death, to idealize his role in the peace process. It's horrible the way he ended his life. There's no doubt about it. I doubt very much whether he had any original ideas that would have taken us out of the paradigm that was part of the reality in the last 50 years, by which we talked about peace while Israel deepened the colonization and Judaization of Palestine. I don't think he had anything significant to contribute. I have to say, I was, in my sins, I was recruited to Rabin's strategic team in June 1992 to help him, because I was close to the Labour Party in those days, to help him to strategize about peace. And it was very clear to me that whereas, like so many people like him, they were willing to go very far in their negotiations with Egypt and Syria, very far in terms of giving up territories. When it came to the Palestinians, the only vision that they could have seen is the vision by which the Palestinians somehow feel safe enough to be in this greater Israel that allows them what I call the open prison model as the best option, given the fact that, as he saw it, the Jews were the indigenous. We have to understand it. Rabin thought that the Jews were the indigenous native people of Palestine, and the Palestinians were foreigners. The language that the Labour Party used, I can show it to you in every manifesto that they have. They talk about the Palestinians as if they are immigrants, that they are the enlightened side of Israeli politics, and therefore they tolerate immigrants. They are willing to let them be in the Jewish state. The Labour Zionist movement regarded the Palestinians from the very early on as aliens in the homeland to which they returned. But because they were from Europe, because they saw themselves as part of the civilized world, they said we can tolerate it. We can make concessions. And I think Rabin was an ultimate figure of this way of looking that was very appealing to a lot of people in the world, I should say. Very appealing. It sounded very reasonable. Partition sounds very businesslike. Half for you, half for me. Okay, you half is only 15%. But half for you, half for me. We both, it's the homeland of both of us. All this language fitted very well into a perspective that the consensus Zionist ideologues still have today and had since 1948. The Palestinians would have to reconcile with the fact that Palestine became a Jewish homeland. It's up to them whether they want to accept it in peace or they want to resist it by force. Rabin didn't have any new ideas about this kind of stuff.
Can you say something about the EU and the USA and their responsibility for the present state?
Well, I think the lecture, in a way, hinted at that responsibility. I think that the EU and the USA, since 1967, were willing partners to this charade of peace. Not because they were ignorant. I think they knew exactly what went on the ground. But I think that they were working on the assumption, which I can understand. I'm just saying it was the wrong assumption, but I can understand where it came from. They built a vision of a Jewish society that has a genuine debate between a peace camp and a camp against peace. So if you want peace, you have to convince the Palestinians to accept the position of the peace camp. If you read the book by Fafo, the Norwegian Peace Institute that brokered Oslo, they say very openly, they said our method was not to bring the Palestinian ideas to the Israelis and to bring the Israelis' ideas to the Palestinians. They say very clearly that our role was to convince the Palestinians to get the best deal they could get from the Israelis. And the best deal was what I call the open prison model. So the EU and the Americans played a role in which they did not, as politicians I can understand it, they did not want to challenge the basic Israeli assumptions on the peace process. Now, whenever they heard Palestinian assumptions that contradicted the Israeli assumptions, they called it, they condemned the Palestinians for being against peace, for not playing the role of peace, for being terrorists. I think that's where the role. There's much more to say about the European heritage and legacy. I don't want, we can talk about maybe a bit later, even in the panel. There is no doubt that Europe has never dealt properly with its Jewish question. There's no doubt. Europe did not deal properly with the Jewish question. The Zionist movement in 1945 offered Europe, and especially this country, a very easy way out of dealing with what happened during the Second World War. Support for the Judaization of Palestine absolves you from any serious discussion about what happened in the Second World War. This was the deal. This is still the deal for a lot of Europeans. This is even the deal for Christian evangelical people around the world. The deal there is not even what we did to the Jews. We even have connection with God that says to us that the return of the Jews to Palestine is a divine scheme. So I think it's a different kind of issue, and I didn't want to focus it in my lecture because I really think that if we discuss 50 years to the occupation, and after 50 years we use the same language, we analyze it on the same assumptions, at least we should ask whether this is the right approach or is there an alternative approach.
Okay. Es gibt noch weitere Fragen.
Okay, eine Frage. Wir haben alle gehört und gesehen, was damals Trump vor ein paar Wochen gesagt hat und geplant hat nach dem Besuch in Saudi-Arabien. Der hat schon einen Plan, im Allgemeinen. Der sagt einfach, zuerst muss die Beziehung mit Israel normalisiert werden von allen arabischen Ländern und danach kann man über eine Friedenslösung sprechen. Das heißt, das ist noch 50 Jahre später, noch weiter müssen wir auch als Palästinenser warten. Jetzt eine Frage zu Ilan. Was kannst du uns als Palästinenser sagen oder raten, was wir jetzt in der Zukunft machen müssen? Sollen wir auf diese Betäubungsvorschläge, Verdummungsvorschläge, die Zwei-Staaten-Lösung noch 20 Jahre, 30 Jahre noch weitermachen? Was können wir praktisch als Aktivistin, als Politiker, als Palästinenser und israelische fortschrittliche Aktivistin machen.
Thank you. Yeah, I understood. Yeah. It's very clearly and slowly. Thank you. Of course, I'm not in a position to advise the Palestinian people what to do. We all understand that there is a problem of disunity in the Palestinian political camp. We all, I think, feel very strongly that the Palestinian Authority is not the ultimate representative body of the Palestinian will or vision. And we also understand that the existing Palestinian political bodies inside Israel, in the occupied territories, are only partly representing what could be a united Palestinian front. However, I think that it's very important for me, as someone who lives there, and is very deeply involved with Palestinian politics, both in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and inside Israel, and as you know, with a lot of group in the diaspora, in the exilic community, and as far as I can, with refugee camps. I think it's very important to note that, especially among the younger generation of Palestinians, there is a sense that the vision that the Palestinian bodies that were chosen as representative bodies, the vision that they have adopted since, I would say, 1982, since the collapse in Lebanon, is not relevant to the reality that they experience. And I think that there is an undercurrent, a strong undercurrent, of young Palestinian activism. And understandably, they can do something that the previous generations could not do. They don't need to meet physically to talk to each other. Even if they are in Haifa and someone is in Hayward, they can talk to each other now, via Facebook, via Twitter. In former days, we had to meet in order to see what the refugee, my cousin refugee on the other side of the border thinks. It wasn't easy to meet. Now they can meet, and from that conversation, for me, three things emerges, which I think would be, to my mind, there would be the Palestinian part. It's not yet, but I feel that this would be the Palestinian part. The first one, for me, is very clear, is that a lot of Palestinians know that the two-state solution is dead. They know it's already in the morgue, in the room of the dead. What they don't know is exactly how to invite us to the funeral. But the body is there. And I think that there will be eventually a cry that says, okay, we gave it a chance. We gave it a chance. We also understand those among us who wanted it. But as you say, another 30 years of that? Another 50 years of that? I can't believe it. I think that there will be a Palestinian initiative, not just an intellectual initiative that exists around the world, one-state solution. I think something more popular. And I think we already can see the beginning. The second thing that will happen, and is inevitable, the Jewish settlers are now a third generation in Palestine. And it's very understandable why, when you face the first wave of colonialists, you think that you can get rid of it. The second wave of colonialists, second generation of colonialists, you begin to ask yourself, maybe I'll have to reconcile to the fact that I have to share the place with them. A third generation is a fait accompli, is a fact. And I think this is very clear to younger Palestinians, that the future includes the Jews of Israel. Includes the Jews of Israel. They don't have this vision of exclusion of the Jews from the future vision. But because they are so much more educated than we are on issues of civil rights and human rights, and because they have the South Africa model in front of us, they have a much clearer agenda of how to change the language. It's not the Israelis who would come and say to the Palestinians, we are willing to make a concession and give you 20% of Palestine to create a state. No. What would happen is But the next generation of Palestinians would come to the Israelis and say, you know what, you can stay. You are part of our future. The whole language of who gives what is very well understood by Zionists. Why do you think that Netanyahu wants Abu Mazen to recognize Israel as a Jewish state? The only people who can really grant a legitimate state for the Jews as a collective, maybe as even a national collective, within historical Palestine, the only people who matter here are the Palestinians. Not the Americans, not the church, not the United Nations, not the international law. The only people who matter are the Palestinians themselves. And the moment this would come clear to the Palestinians, I think this discourse would change. And the third thing, I think that it's very clear that we have other problems in Palestine. We have problems between religious people and secular people. We have ecological problems. We have problems of neoliberalism. I think there is an urge in the younger generation that I can't see in my generation to say, we don't like this excuse that because there is no political solution, don't talk to me about ecology, don't talk to me about women's rights, don't talk to me about issues of morality. They go together in their mind. Social justice and justice for the Palestinian case is going to come back, I think. Because also the younger generation in the world is not afraid, as we've seen in Britain, is not afraid to use words such as justice and morality in politics, which our generation keeps telling them, come on, don't be naive, don't be ridiculous. They don't think it's ridiculous, they don't think it's naive. And when you use the yardstick of justice and morality, to the case of Israel and Palestine, not balance of power, the settler-colonialist project of Israel doesn't stand a chance in the international community.
Eigentlich keine Zeit mehr. Von Ihnen Vater noch ganz kurz, dann lassen wir letzte Frage noch zu.
Yeah, you had a very hard opinion about the peace movement in Israel, and I would ask you, what is your position, or what do you think about Uri Avneri? Yes, I think he would have a different opinion.
I would be much, if Uri Avneri would sit here, and you ask him what is your opinion on Ilan Pappe, he would be much nastier than I would be on him. But he's also older, so I'm much more respectful. Sorry? Yeah, we debated. Yeah, we had a debate. I think that I have a lot of respect, first of all, to anyone who for so many years was willing to struggle to end the suffering of the Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, who was willing to pay a very high price for that struggle. And in this respect, I have all the admiration in the world for him and his activity. I think ideologically we disagree with each other. I think that he doesn't even begin to digest his own role in the ethnic cleansing of Palestine in 1948. I don't think he understands the level of criminality that the Israelis were involved in 1948, and he was part of that criminality, and he never came to terms with it. And I think it's very important for anyone who sees himself as part of the peace camp in Israel not to ignore the criminality behind 1948. I think not enough people in the world fully understand the level of cruelty and barbarism that accompanied the destruction of Palestine in 1948. I think that's very important. And without that understanding, there is no genuine dialogue between Jews and Israelis. And the second disagreement with him, as you know, he regards the two-state solution almost like a sacred solution. And he has a genuine worry that a one-state solution would turn the Palestinians, he puts it, to slaves and kind of underprivileged people. This is one possible model. Actually, this is the model that exists today. Israel today is a one-state solution. I think we're entitled as activists struggle for a society in which this would not happen, without necessarily believing that the only thing that can create normal life for the Palestinians who were robbed of normal life in the last 100 years, that the only thing that can offer normality to the Palestinians is if we give them a Bantustan in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and they are willing to be second-rate citizens in the state of Israel. I think the Palestinians and we who support them deserve to have a vision of something better. I think what Uri Avneri offers them is not good enough. And in this respect, we have civilized debate.